already introduced that we're on Prophecies concerning Israel and part 2. And the reason we're on part 2 is because there are so many. And I was given some notes to look through. And you'll be pleased to know there are only 39 pages of A4. So actually there's too much stuff for us to go through in everything. But we have regular talks. Those of you who are online, have a look at the things that we've got coming up in Mumbles. We would love to talk to you in more detail about some of these topics. Where John Owen left us last week is he took us through the Old Testament history of Israel and how God said, look, you've got to listen to me. You've got to do what I say. And if you do that, there will be blessings. But if you don't do them, there will be cursings. And we saw this cycle, especially through Judges. I was listening to it in the car, actually. And through Judges, you saw this cycle of Israel not doing as they were told. They got into trouble. They got really in difficult situations. And then they cried to God. And God provided judges, people who he was involved with, people who he gave his word to, who would rescue them from that situation. And what John was showing to us is that Israel, as a nation, as a people, were a witness to what God says will come true. And if I have an overriding objective this evening, it's to show you how remarkable God is at fulfilling his purpose, showing to us through his people, Israel, that he is fulfilling his plan and purpose that involves you and me. Because we can be part of God's eternal plan. And that's why prophecy is so exciting, why it is personal. Why we need to make sure we grasp these things. So where we're going in today is John took us to a point where Israel was scattered all over the earth. When Jerusalem was demolished, it was taken to the ground. And the people of Israel who were living in those parts were scattered all over the earth. Now look at this prophecy. Here it is. I shall put my spirit in you, says God, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. So what God was saying is that even though this people who were scattered all over the earth, because they hadn't listened and they hadn't done, God was going to show to everybody, including you and me, that he's still in control and he would bring them back to their own land. We'll come back to that a little later. I've split what we're going to consider into 4 sections. And this element about it being a miracle is that when you consider God's prophecy, and then how it's delivered, it goes against all odds. So if you had set about at the beginning to think, is this possible? You'd say, no, come on, that's not going to happen. But it does. And this is about a nation of people on a global scale. In a minute, I'm going to try and give you an illustration that I'm going to tell you now doesn't work. But the reality is, I want you to just think about the allegory of the story and then take it to a nation and a global scale. And I hope it sort of triggers some thoughts. The fact that they witness is the point that we want to always take home. Israel, however badly they've behaved in the past, whatever we see they're doing right now, in the country of Israel, they are a witness to God's plan, and we've got to accept that. And a testimony, therefore, to Yahweh. That's God's name. So Israel being in existence and doing what they're doing right now in 2024 should be no surprise. So let me tell you this very poor allegory, this parable, this story. Imagine you had some kind of guru. And he, I don't know, let's say he is part of a tribe or he lives in Africa, but he foretells the future. And he says, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. There's going to be this person called Swentis. It's a very common African name. You've probably not heard it, but Swentis. And this person's going to be born, and he is chosen, he's special, and he's going to have a lot of privileges. He's going to be precious. And actually, he's going to be given his very special home. Okay? But Swentis has to do as he's told, okay? I kind of realised that it looks quite like a lady. So should we call Swentis a lady? Is that okay? Doesn't matter. So Swentis, she has to do as she's told. And if she doesn't, then there will be consequences. I don't know, for those of you in the room, do you have consequences if you don't do as you're told? I can see some of you are a little bit scared at telling me the answer to that. For sure, we are given parameters. This is how, and that's what we learn, isn't it, from the Bible? Adam and Eve, you've got to do this, and if you don't, this is the consequence. And, Swentis, she didn't do as she was told and was taken from her home to a foreign land. But this tribe leader, this guru, said, look, actually, I'm telling you about this because I want to tell you this is going to happen, but actually they will be taken back. She will be taken back to her home. And that was all against all probability. Now, you've got to remember that this tribe leader has said all this before it actually happens. And then this tribe leader says, the problem is, go back to the homeland or go back to their home, and they're then not going to do as they're told again. So this lady doesn't do as she's told and is taken away very brutally from their home. And in fact, the lady disappears completely as well. Don't know where she's gone, just dispersed, no idea. But one day, all of a sudden, this lady reappears, and actually not in great shape. But as this tribe leader says, this person here is going to do exactly what I've said, and she will reappear and go back to her home. Now, I told you it's a ridiculous story, but if this tribe leader had said that before all of these things happen, you're thinking, hang on a minute, surely that can't all happen. This lady would be an incredible witness to the fact that that man, that tribe leader, knew exactly what was going to happen in the future. And what's really sad is that God has done exactly that in a much grander scale. He has said what will happen on a world scale. He's given an eternal plan. And he's saying, look, this is what's going to happen. you can see these things happen. And when these things happen with my people Israel, that is a witness to what I am, to who I am, to my eternal purpose. For I am the Lord, I do not change, from Malachi 3 verse 6. Therefore, you are consumed. You are not consumed, O sons of Jacob. So even though we see, as we saw last week and we'll see this week, Israel goes through loads of trouble, real big challenges where you think they're not going to survive, God makes sure they are always there. And God brings them to the forefront of our attention, just like we have today in our news, with the nations that are round about them. And their witness is to prove this, that the Lord, Yahweh, there is no other. He is the Savior, and we need to look to him. So that's what these prophecies about Israel are all about. So open your Bibles, and if you found Ezekiel, that's good. But I want you to come back a few books to Jeremiah, and I want you to come to chapter 30. So remember that Brother John Owen took us to a point where Israel was scattered all over the earth. They'd left Jerusalem, Israel, not because they wanted to. They were being taken apart by the Romans, and they were being scattered through persecution and fleeing wherever they could find some form of rest. But I just want you to see in these verses the repetition, okay? So in Jeremiah 30 and verse 11, we're going to get the idea that God is going to look after these people, Israel. They are going to be scattered. And if you have a paraphrase at the beginning of your chapter, I'll give you mine. It says at the beginning of chapter 30, God showeth Jeremiah the return of the Jews. Okay. And in verse 11, it says, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee, though I make a full end of all nations where I have scattered you, yet I will not make a complete end of you, but I will correct you in justice. So he's not going to do nothing. He's going to correct them and will not let you go altogether unpunished, because there are consequences. They have disobeyed his word. So let's just pick up these verses then on the screen. That's a really helpful central verse, verse 11. Let's look at verse 3. Lo, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, saith the Lord, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. So he's saying, look, I'll bring them back to the land. What's that land? It's Palestine, what we now know as Israel. Let's go to the next verse, verse 10. Therefore, fear thou not, O my servant Jacob. So they've got to put trust in the Lord. Neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity, and Jacob shall return and be in rest and be quiet, and none shall make them afraid. Verse 24. Again, last verse of the chapter. The fierce anger of the Lord shall not return until ye have done it, and until ye have performed the intents of his heart. In the latter days ye shall consider it. So God is going to perform his purpose, and they've got to see that this is all part of God's eternal plan. Just come into chapter 31, verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. So everybody, all nations, look, this isn't just about God looking after Israel. This is about a witness. This is showing that God is in control of world events. Turn a couple of pages if you need to, chapter 33 and verse 7. It says there again, I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel to return, and will build them as at the first. So God is saying, have a look at Israel. keep an eye on them, because these prophecies in the Bible that were written before these things happened, you will see God working out his eternal purpose. And there are many other verses, okay? So I'm just going to put another one on the screen, which I can see lots of you writing down. Ezekiel 36:24, I'll take you from among the nations, gather you out from all countries, and bring you into your own land. And I'm just going to go back to a phrase we've had already from Malachi 3 verse 6. I am the Lord, I do not change. Therefore, you are not consumed, Israel, O sons of Jacob. This is all about showing that the Lord God is constant. He's faithful. He does not change. And a witness to that fact is the people of Israel. And so where we started is here. Ezekiel 37 verses 1 to 14. I'll put my spirit in you and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. So God is very clear how Israel function, how Israel are, his chosen people, his precious people, his witness to his eternal purpose. Let me just go back from that slide a second. Bear with me. So I'm now going to show you a video. And this video is a few years old. It was when there was an anniversary of the establishment of the people of Israel. But it's going to take us through this prophecy that I just want you to come back to in Ezekiel 37. Okay, so if you're still in Jeremiah, you've got to go from Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and we want chapter 37. And what we read about here is a valley of bones that were dry. And this vision that Ezekiel sees is a vision of a parable of Israel. So it's showing that Israel has been scattered everywhere. They're like dead people. They're not in existence anymore as a nation. And here they are, a valley of dry bones. And from verses 1 through to 10, we see how that actually this vision that Ezekiel sees is that they're going to come alive again. These bones are going to come together and they're going to have skin and flesh. God is going to breathe into them so that they're a living people once again. And if you look at verse 14, it says, I shall put my spirit in you and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall ye know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord. So this next video is going to include this parable, but it's also going to talk about the nation of Israel. As I say, it's a few years old because it was celebrating an anniversary. And the person who's narrating is a Jew, okay? So there's an element of bias. But what I want you to take away is how incredible the reestablishment of the nation of Israel in their land is. That's what you've got to take away. It is amazing. So I hope this makes sense, and I hope it's better than I can narrate to you.
This year we celebrate 70 years of the reestablishment of our beloved country Israel. 70 years is monumental, for a man's days are 70 years on earth. For the first time in 2,000 years, a Jew could be born in the land of Israel, live a full life, die in the land of Israel, free, never knowing the exile. This year we celebrate 1948. 1,948 years ago, the Roman Empire destroyed our lives. They burned and demolished our temple and exiled the Jews from Jerusalem, all while glorying their vicious imperial conquest and victory. The Jews rebelled and fought valiantly for their freedom. The rebellion was crushed, and the Jewish people found themselves homeless, helpless, and lost for centuries upon centuries. The long and bitter Jewish exile reached the darkest time in human history. As we celebrate 70 years, we must remember where we were only 74 years ago. And I saw a great open space with dry bones. Can these bones live? Only you know. After the UN voted in favor of the partition plan on May 14, 1948, the 5th of Iyar, the British mandate was due to expire. The year was fraught with countless dangers, escalating Arab violence across the land of Israel, combined with threats of annihilation from every bordering country. American President Harry Truman, in a power play against Russia, began to pressure the United Nations to reject the partition plan and snuff out Israel's hope for independence. The generals of the Haganah and Hamas stood together opposing Ben-Gurion's plan to declare a state. On May 13th, the eve of the Declaration of Independence, General George Marshall, then Secretary of State of the United States, sent Ben-Gurion a brutal ultimatum, demanding the postponement of the Declaration of Independence. Marshall, together with the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, imposed a military embargo. They threatened that Ben-Gurion's Declaration of Independence would trigger a regional war, which would doom the Jewish people to a second Holocaust in less than 10 years. And the United States did not provide any assistance to the Jews. Intel arrived that Britain had supplied arms to Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq, preparing them for the attack. The Palmyra force of Haganah numbered only 300. They had almost no equipment and no uniforms. Only half the men in each unit had guns. All of the freedom fighters of Israel, the Haganah and the Lebanon together, numbered only a few thousand. On the eve of the declaration, Israel's army was ill-equipped, unorganized, with no tanks, no real air force, and no battle plan, against 5 professional armies, trained and funded by the British. How could the Jews defend themselves? Standing alone against Israel's top military and political ranks, betrayed, isolated, and threatened by the international community, including the United States, with Arab armies invading from every front. It was now, or maybe never. Under extraordinary pressure, a self-proclaimed secular Zionist, David Ben-Gurion, was overcome, possessed with a ruach v'ra, a courageous spirit of biblical proportions. And just like that, 2,000 years of exile came to an end. 1,948 years ago, Jerusalem was destroyed. We are celebrating the most legendary comeback story in human history. Can these bones live? Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. Thus says the Lord Hashem, I'm going to open your graves and lift you out of your graves, my people, and bring you to the land of Israel. From dry bones and ashes, total despair and desperation, Israel was resurrected from the dead, and new life was breathed into the Jewish people. "70 years ago, there were 600,000 Jews in Israel. Today, there are over 6.5 million from over 100 countries. In 70 years, Israel went from having one asphalt road to building Ben-Gurion International Airport, some of the best hospitals in the world, and built more roads and infrastructure per capita and faster than any other place on the planet. Israel has transformed a barren, desolate, non-productive land into one of the most powerful economies in the world. There are more Torah institutions and more Jewish money in the land of Israel than any other time in Jewish history. from a group of underground and underarmed freedom fighters. The idea has emerged as one of the most respected militaries in Europe. The number 70 is represented in Hebrew by the letter Ayin, which also means eye. For 1,948 years, the Jewish people have been praying that Tehazena Eimenu B'Shuvcha Zion. May our eyes see your return to Zion. We're not praying that one day we hope to see your return to Zion. Let our eyes see that it's already happening right now.
Okay, I did say it was quite biased, but 6,000 to 6.5 million Jews back in the land. Let me just read this verse again. Ezekiel 37, verse 14. And I shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall ye know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord. When you look at the way in which those things came to pass in the political environment, within the way in which the nations were situated at that time, and the way in which Israel was scattered, it is incredible. It is a miracle which keeps coming up, which is why our first section was this section called A Miracle. And yet, what God has done is kept Israel at the forefront of our lives, in our news, so that we never are taken away from the fact that he is fulfilling his purpose through the kingdom of men. Last week, we were considering how in the Old Testament, in Daniel 2, through Daniel, God had shown how that there were going to be nations that would impact upon Israel. And he's going to show that there are future nations that will impact Israel. In Daniel 7, he gives more details about those nations, which are really specific about how those nations would be impacting upon Israel, the types of people, the types of nation that they would be. So we just saw that they were celebrating an anniversary from 1948 to 2018. Do you know, in that period of time, in 1967, there were a group of nations who tried to destroy Israel again. They tried to take them out of the land again. And I just want to share with you what is known as the 6-Day War, just a few elements of that, because again, they witness to the fact that God is saying, I'll bring them back, I'll establish them in my land, and he makes that happen against all odds. There is another video in a minute, and the same person is narrating, and he loves the word miracle. So you might want to write down however many times the guy says that. So here you can see on the screen, the president of Egypt said that the danger of Israel lies in the very existence of Israel. So just want to get rid of it. Can you see at the bottom there, in another quote, they want to exterminate the Zionist existence. So they're not mixing their words. And by the way, Hamas use exactly the same wording today. And what these nations around Israel wanted to do was to enter into a battle of annihilation. And some of the pictures that they gave of how they wanted to annihilate the Jewish people were really quite savage. You know, they're really unkind, and they showed that they wanted to just take the people of Israel out. And just to give you a bit of context, before the 6-Day War happened, there was a United Nations presence in Israel, and where you've got that sea that comes up here, that was also managed. But just before the Six-Day War, those United Nations presence were taken out. And when you looked at the armies that these nations around Israel had, so Israel is the light color, okay? So that's the territory of Israel at the time. This is what Israel had in terms of, they didn't just have 2 tanks, by the way. This is just a key, because if you see what the Arab states have, can you see that they had a lot more? That's what we're trying to make clear. So the odds about this being a success for Israel was absolutely not on. It was almost impossible for them to counter these Arab states who wanted, as we have seen, to take them out. And can you see that all these nations around them were coming in from every side? We'll see later on that this is another prophecy about Israel, that they will be surrounded by nations. Look out for the word miracle.
The Muslim nations of the Zionism would not accept Israel's existence until its founding in 1948. They began amassing huge amounts of sophisticated weaponry and lobbying for the implementation of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against the Jewish state. On the 15th of May 1967, on Israel's Independence Day, a 3-week period began into the power of those tense or beautiful periods in Israel's history. In direct contravention of international agreements, Egyptian leader Jamal Abdel Nasser removed the UN peacekeeping forces and began leading tens of thousands of sailors and hundreds of tanks into what was the demilitarized Sinai Peninsula towards Israel's southern border. Egypt also blockaded the Straits of Tiran, an open international waterway, which was essentially a declaration of war. Israel turned to the nations of the world, primarily to the United States, for assistance against Egyptian aggression, but somehow all Western countries decided to remain neutral. Very quickly it became apparent that the promises were all but forgotten. Israel, with 2.5 million Jews, is left alone to face the might of the Arab nations. Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon formed a military alliance and began moving forces into Jordan towards these wars. When the Arab countries realized that the world had abandoned Israel, many other Muslim countries were openly calling for the destruction of Israel, and will and means to murder millions of Jews without impunity. Top IDF commanders expressed their concerns at the high price people was liable to pay in waves for their leader. Some military experts projected the toll between 20 and 100,000 lives. Israel prepared cemeteries all over the country, ready to accommodate many expected victims. Massive parks were prepared in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other cities, in case the cemeteries would have no more spooks. World governments, instead of defending Israel's right to exist, warned Israel continuously not to attack. However, the people of Israel had no choice but to go to war, to defend their country and their very existence. At 7:15 a.m. on June 5th, 1967, the IDF launched Operation Loket Focus. Almost the entire Israeli Air Force was dispatched in a daring mission. Only 12 planes stayed behind. The rest of this operation was extraordinary, as the fighter pilots flew at an unprecedented low altitude of less than 20 meters above the ground. Egypt had the most advanced ground, air, missile defense systems in the Middle East. Most of the Israeli jets were owned in outdated French planes. If the Israeli jets would have been detected, many would have fallen, and Israel would have been left with practically no air force. And then, a miracle occurred. The most advanced Russian-made jets that patrolled the airspace along the borders between Egypt and Israel were, for that one critical hour, grounded. Incredibly, at that very same time, the top commanders of Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq flew together to observe the Egyptian forces invading Sinai. The Egyptian officers had ordered all anti-aircraft units not to fire unless given a direct order as long as they were in flight. This created total confusion on the Egyptian ground as Israel stuck exactly in that window of time. By 7:45 a.m., the high Hellenic province resulted in the Israeli Air Force reaching all the Egyptian airfields without even one plane being detected. More than 200 Egyptian planes, almost half of Egypt's fleets, were almost instantaneously destroyed, also bombing the runways and making impotent the mightiest air force in man's. General Monty-Hood, commander of the Air Force, said, "In my wildest dreams, they never would have conceived of such an incredible success."
Sorry, bit of an abrupt end there. But I'm trying to illustrate that God has kept Israel at the forefront of the world's attention over the years. And this war, this 6-day war in 1967, they never should have been able to have come out of that still being in the land. And yet God has said, I'm going to bring them back and I will put them there. So when that narrator is talking about a miracle, it really is incredible that when those Israeli fighters went up, no guns were being fired. The reason why is that the Egyptian president, Nasser, he'd gone up in the plane with a load of the other Arab presidents to show them how great the armies were. And so he said, look, you can't shoot right now. Don't shoot right now because we're just going on a joyride. And that is the very hour when Israel struck. They didn't know that. So these things are incredible, however you see them. And, you know, I would challenge you to go on to Google, have a look at if there's any other solution to that, if there's another version of events. There isn't. It's really embarrassing if you're on the other side of that 6-day war. Look, this is Israel. I showed you this map before the 6-day war. This was the amount of territory they gained after the 6-day war. And everything you read in the news today still goes back to the challenge of this territory gain. So it's been a real problem. And when you look at the things that happened within that 6-day war, those look big numbers, don't they? But when you compare it with the numbers of the Arab states, it's very different. Just incredible. So with all the odds stacked against them, it was quite an incredible thing. And I won't ask you what that verse is, but this was quoted by the person who led the army of Israel, Moshe Dayan, that this is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. And he quoted that verse, wrote it on a paper, and put it into the wall in Jerusalem. So again, we go back to this verse, this prophecy in Malachi 3 verse 6. I am the Lord. I do not change. Therefore you are not consumed, Israel, you sons of Jacob. And I'm just giving you a couple of other verses that you might want to jot down in your notepads. Jerusalem is always at the center of these things, and God has chosen Jerusalem to put his name there. And we're told in Leviticus 26 that ye shall chase your enemies and they shall fall before you by the sword. Israel will be victorious because God is with them. So all through Israel's history, they have been a witness to these prophecies, to the very eternal purpose of the Lord God. So I want you now to open your Bibles again to John chapter 10. So this is something that the Lord Jesus Christ challenged those people who were listening to him, who were following him. And I think it's a challenge that we can take to ourselves, okay? So we've got 4 verses here, 2 in John chapter 10 and 2 in John chapter 20. So we want to go to the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John chapter 10, and we want verses 37 and 38. The Lord Jesus says to those who are following him, "If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though you believe not me, believe the works, that ye may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him." And so I would suggest the challenge to us is hearing those words of the Lord Jesus Christ. When we look at the works of God, he's saying, look, this is what I'll do with Israel. Here are the prophecies of Israel. This is what, if you're struggling to believe all the words that I'm giving you, believe the works that I'm doing. Believe the works that I've shared with you. Turn to John chapter 20, a few pages on, and we want verses 30 and 31. So the Lord Jesus put down that challenge in John chapter 10, and then in John chapter 20, it finishes with this narrative. "Many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written, that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye might have life through his name." So let's take those words and the challenge that the Lord Jesus made. The Lord God has put these things before us, this miracle, this witness, that we might see the works that he is doing on a global scale with his chosen people, Israel. So let's just keep going to see how that God has put that into even greater detail. So there are some slides that we're going to come on to now, which a few years ago I nicked from Brother Pete, but these are about Israel coming back to the land beyond 1948, beyond 1967, and how they would come to a certain part of the land of Israel. So open your Bibles to that passage, Ezekiel 36. And it's worth, if you haven't done so already, just underlining these key elements that are in yellow on the screen. You see, in Ezekiel 36, it says there in verse 8, it's to the mountains of Israel. So we'll need to just figure out where they are in a moment. The number of people will be increased. So I will increase the number of people and animals living on you. It says in verse 10, "I will multiply men upon you and all the house of Israel, even all of it. I will multiply upon you," verse 11, "man and beast." And it says that I will settle you after your old estates. So, yes, we've seen a lot of people coming back to Israel. So you can, hopefully that'll come up in a second. It's come up on my screen. There it is. When we got to 1948, you can see that the growth of the population in Israel went up hugely. Here we've got where it grows massively in 1948. That's when Russia was the USSR. became Russia, and people were able to leave that place. So there was a bit of an exodus then. What's incredible is that people who had studied Bible prophecy knew this was going to happen already. So this is back in 1848. There was a Christadelphian then who said there will have been a considerable gathering of Israelites upon the mountains of Israel before the invasion of the country. So Bible students were expecting this to happen, and these mountains are easily identified geographically. You can see by the topography there that there are these mountains of Israel which are called the West Bank. Okay, so that's where these mountains of Israel are. And funnily enough, there are settlements on the mountains of Israel that you'll read about in the news. And here, again, these are a little older, but I'll give you some up-to-date information in a moment. These settlements grew in their population hugely. They were fulfilling Bible prophecy. And this next graphic, I think it takes us up to something like 2016. But what it shows you is how many people came to settle in these areas on the mountains of Israel. So if I hopefully press this again, it should start to populate. So can you see how in this very specific area around the prophecy of Ezekiel 36, we're seeing the things that God has said about Israel coming true. I'm going to, this Security Council is saying, look, these settlements shouldn't happen. It's now illegal. When these things were delivered, you'd think, right, okay, well, that will put a stop to it. But actually, remember, God has prophesied that this will happen. And have a look at this. So this is a report from the 12th of February, 24, and West Bank settler population has grown by nearly 3%. So I think the numbers that you saw in 2016 were around 350,000. It's now 517,000, not including East Jerusalem settlements. So it hasn't stopped. God's prophecy is coming true in front of our eyes. And there are a number of other prophecies about Israel, which you might say are a bit softer. So there are a number of prophecies where we're told that with Israel scattered across the world, they're going to have some aggro. They're going to get some problems. They're going to become a proverb and a byword. So people are going to speak against them. So just jot these references down. Deuteronomy 28, verse 37. Here's another one that you can link up. 1 Kings 9, verse 7. Okay, so I will cut off Israel out of the land which I've given them. So that's what we've been looking at tonight. And it says that Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. So you can also write down 2 Chronicles 7, verse 20. I'll pluck them up by the roots out of my land. So here we go again. I will cast them out of my sight and will make it to be a proverb and a byword among all nations. So we have a lot of Jews, by the way, living in this land. Are they a proverb and a byword? Well, look at this. So this is Wednesday, the 2nd of October. Anti-Semitic. So people who are giving grief to the Jewish people after the Hamas attack on Israel, it says that they've increased threefold. They've trebled. Using data reported directly by victims, they reckon 5,583 incidents. That's incredible. So that's happening today in our country, and this is Bible prophecy about God's witnesses. Here again, a third of UK Jews experience anti-Semitic incident following October the 7th. So the things that are going on in Israel, where God has taken the people back to their land, are affecting the Jews all over the world. So what we're seeing at the moment isn't actually a surprise to us. So I'm just giving you this so you're familiar. We've got Israel here, Lebanon, which is where we're seeing a lot of the battle at the moment. Gaza is just down here. We've got Iran, who fired some rockets recently. So just giving you an idea of the geography, we need to remember that God has said that these people are his witnesses, and that everything he's doing, everything that's happening with Israel, are so that we can believe him, that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God formed, neither shall there be after me. And we've seen this before, but we're now beginning to see it in our news today. That Jerusalem, the people of Israel, the land of Israel, are compassed with armies. And this is what God is saying will happen. So most of you know that I work within Christadelphian care homes. I've been in a few homes over the last couple of days, and I've seen brothers and sisters who are 90, 92, 93, they've got newspapers in their hands, looking at the news, and they are so excited. Now that seems crazy, doesn't it? But they're seeing things that they thought would happen. They're seeing things that they know is a witness to God being in control of world events. So it's incredible that Israel are fighting at the moment on this front at the top and this front down here. And they're also having to fight with Iran, which are over there. And we're seeing them compassed by armies. This is just a map, as it tells you there, of the amount of fighting that is going on. And do you remember when we were looking at the 1967 Six-Day War, how actually they just wanted to annihilate the Zionists. They wanted to take Israel out completely. And again, this is from a newspaper, and this is about Iran's Islamic Revolution Guard. But they basically just want to take Israel out. They've launched 200 ballistic missiles. It says here, whether Hamas would recognize Israel is debated. They've emphasized that they do not recognize Israel, but indicate they have a recognition of its presence. And it goes back to this 1967 borders. They just want to take Israel out. And huge amounts of this challenge with the Jews has happened since the invasion of Hamas and the things that they did. Do you know how big these missiles are? Have you got any idea? So I didn't know either. I'm afraid I thought they were like drone size, but I was wrong. It's massive, isn't it? Look at this. And those things, over the last 24 hours, have been firing into Israel. Just incredible. And yet, this is what God has said would happen. They're still fighting on the south. And if you have a look here, Hamas has said that it's committed to destroying Israel. You wouldn't think that that's allowed to be said, but they're very open about it. And Hamas is funded by Iran. So here, Iran has armed and trained and funded Hamas at the bottom. So you've got these nations now working together to destroy Israel. So I want you to take away from this evening how that God is making sure Israel is in our news. It's in the forefront of our minds, and we should see it as a witness to God fulfilling his eternal plan. It is amazing how they exist. They're in their land and doing exactly what God has said. You see, just looking at this map, what we're looking for and what we're excited about is God has said Russia, with other nations, is going to come down to Israel. In fact, they're going to team up with some people down here, Libya, and this is called Ethiopia in the Bible. They're also going to team up with Iran. So when you're reading the news, we've got to look at all these things because we're expecting them to happen. Let me just take you to our reading where we started, Ezekiel 38. So Ezekiel 38, you probably, if you had your Bible open, was still in Ezekiel 36. It says, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog and Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. I am against thee, O Gog, verse 2, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws and bring thee forth. So God is going to control these nations. And what he's talking about here are these nations in the north that we believe to be Russia coming down. Look, it says here, verse 5, Persia, Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. They're coming to do battle and they're going to come against Israel. So that's a whole other talk. But what we are beginning to understand through the prophecies of Israel, that God is in control and he's showing to us through them that he is fulfilling his eternal plan. And what he's saying to you and to I, that we need to use our ears and our eyes to watch. I put here, it's best to keep them closed and shut. So seriously, and for those of you online, if you don't want to see God, just keep them shut and closed. Because if you open them, you will see God at work. You would have to ignore it with the things that we've got going on in our world today and in our news, to not see the things that God has written concerning Israel coming to pass. So those are some of the things that I think when I look at Israel excite me and help me to put my trust in God. And this is the phrase, the verse that we started with, that God has said that he would put his spirit in Israel, that they would live and that he would place them in his own land. That vision, that parable of the valley of dry bones. So thanks very much for being here.